Do you think this overture by New Delhi is grounded with serious or unserious intentions, or just simply meant to express its frustration with the Trump administration?
India has always taken great pride being an independent country with its own sovereignty and with its own decision-making power vested solely in India. They expect that by manhandling India, India will succumb to the maximum pressure from the United States. I would not be surprised if India eventually decides to do what China is doing. If Washington wants to impose 100% or up to 500% tariff against Chinese exports to the United States in the name of importing oil and gas from Russia and from Iran, then China will need to reciprocate. However, I think India should have exhausted all the investigations before they pointing finger at Pakistan. China is fully committed, providing maximum support to Pakistan in defending its legitimate interests, including defending its sovereignty and territorial integrity. China and Pakistan jointly produce planes together, as well as China supplying Pakistan with very sophisticated fighter planes, as well as other military cooperation, is the foundation for Pakistan to win this aerial battle against India early May. Each time when a Chinese national is killed inside the Pakistan, it causes a lot of grief among the Chinese people. But I would call on the Indian government to respect the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of Pakistan. The fact that Balochistan is part of the sovereign territory of Pakistan, I declared that by weaponizing water in the Indus River in times of peace will be considered as a crime against humanity. How can you deny hundreds of millions of people in the downstreaming Pakistan the benefit of water in the Indus River? In times of war, this will be considered as a war crime. Therefore, I urge on the Indians to respect Pakistan as a sovereign country and resort to peace and negotiation and diplomacy to solve whatever problems there are between India and Pakistan.
Do you think it's correct to also say that if India is to fight Pakistan, it is actually fighting with China? Is that assessment correct in your opinion, or this is just completely misplaced?
If there are other countries which want to invest in Pakistan, like the United States, be my guest. The more countries interested in investing in Pakistan, the better.
Hello and welcome to Chaos Knowledge, where headlines meet depth and noise gives way to nuance. I'm your host, Usama Nizamani. Today, I'm joined by one of the leading China experts. He happens to have served as the interpreter to Mr. Deng Xiaoping, and he happens to hold multiple positions at the moment. Right now, he happens to be serving as chair professor at Suzhou University, as well as chairman at the China Energy Security Institute and the vice president at the Center for China and Globalization. My guest today, you've guessed it right, Mr. Victor Gao. Mr. Gao, welcome to Chaos Knowledge.
Sir, thank you very much for having me.
So, Mr. Gao, let's start our conversation with the very first question. And this question has to do about the tariff wars that we see both China and the United States engaging in right now. Thankfully, there's a truce. We might have another breakthrough on the hands. But so far, we see that China, on one hand, has actually restricted access, of both the United States and different Western countries to its critical minerals. And on the other hand, United States, along with a host of other measures, has actually restricted China's access to high bandwidth memory chips. How do you actually see the progress going forward? Do you think there's likely to be a major breakthrough when it comes to the question of reciprocal tariffs between the United States and China?
First of all, what the United States is doing is launching the unprecedented, the largest scale anti-China tariff war, and also the anti-the-world tariff war. This is the wrong war for the United States to fight against China and against so many other countries in the world. Literally speaking, the United States tries to destroy free trade and tries to destroy the international order that we are all living in. China does not want to have the trade war with the United States, and China has indicated again and again that if the United States is serious about discussion with China about how to resolve the trade issues, China will be very happy to talk with the United States. However, if the United States wants to continue to fight this trade war with China, China will fight till the very end. So we need to understand what is the very end China is prepared for. I think, unlike what Washington really wants to achieve, China is fully prepared to see complete winding to zero of the two-way trade between China and the United States. Meaning, if the United States does not want to see exports of goods from China to the United States, then there will be no more exports of goods from the United States to China. China will be able to survive this complete winding down of trade in goods between China and the United States. Now, that will be a major disaster for the United States, and that will also cause a lot of pain in China. But from the Chinese perspective, China values free trade more than the pure calculation of its economic losses, for example, and China will be a champion of defending free trade. And China does not want to allow any country in the world to dominate above other countries and to weaponize trade or weaponize tariff to achieve its other geopolitical goals. China is not to be pushed around by any country, including the United States, in this trade war against China and against mankind as a whole. Therefore, we want to send the signal to Washington. If you are serious about discussion how to end this trade war, we are ready to talk with you. If you want to weaponize tariff and weaponize trade, be prepared to see the complete winding down to zero of the two-way trade between China and the United States.
Mr. Gao, you speak of complete winding down of trade between both China and United States. Tariff wars are certainly not new. We actually saw this when Trump came into power the first time. And then we again saw a lowering down of intensity more recently in the previous administration under President Biden. But again, we see that intensification come back again under the President Trump 2.0. Where do you think the actual progress might lie? I mean, my question is, are you really seeing some kind of a major breakthrough after this, after the this 90-day truce is over? Do you see some kind of a progress where both China and United States come to some kind of an agreement, resulting in a durable settlement of rules to accommodate each other? Or do you think this has now become a new normal and it might continue for long?
I'm always an optimist, and I do want to see Washington and Beijing make joint efforts to make sure that the bilateral trade between China and the United States, which is one of the largest bilateral trade in human history, will continue as normal as it can be, rather than being sabotaged by weaponizing tariff or trade between China and the United States. However, my optimism may or may not be well placed because it seems that Washington wants to weaponize trade with China and try to use tariff to achieve its ulterior motives. For example, it recently threatens to impose secondary sanctions against China if China continues to buy oil and gas from Russia and from Iran. From the Chinese perspective, these trade are completely normal trade between China and Russia on the one hand, and between China and Iran on the other hand. And the sanctions imposed by the United States are not sanctions blessed by the United Nations Security Council, and China refuses to abide by any sanction declared by any country in the world if they are not blessed and supported by the United Nations Security Council. So if Washington wants to impose 100% or up to 500% tariff against Chinese exports to the United States in the name of importing oil and gas from Russia and from Iran, then China will need to reciprocate, raising tariffs against the US exports to China up to, let's say, 100% or up to 500% in retaliation against Washington's weaponizing of tariff. That means there will be no more trade between China and the United States. Complete winding down to zero. China exports zero to the United States because of the sabotage by Washington, and by retaliation, China will not allow any export of goods from the United States to China. This will be a major blow to world economic development, and this will really cause chaos in the world. But it's not initiated by China. China is defending its legitimate rights and defending free trade. And China will not tolerate Washington to bully China, because if you're giving to the pressure from the United States, you do not know how much they want to put on you in terms of violation of your sovereignty and territorial integrity. So this is the moment of truth. You either have normal trade with China or you have no trade with China. And if you want to weaponize tariff against China, you get tariff weaponized against you. This is the world where you need to respect China as a sovereign country, as a very large, impactful country, rather than trying to pull off scheme after scheme, try to bully China and humiliate China. You need to give China the minimum respect that China deserves. And we are ready to fight this war with the United States till the very end if they do not demonstrate enough sincerity and goodwill and respect for the Chinese people. This is where we are at this crossroad. If the United States is serious about talking about negotiations with China, then we can resolve all the problems. If they want to pick up a fight against China, they will get a fight.
Now, Mr. Gao, I really hope that, there's some kind of a truce that is reached between the United States and China. Now, let's come to South Asia. Speaking of India and Pakistan, we saw a few months ago, especially in April after the terror attacks in Pahalgam, we saw India did not agree to share evidence with Islamabad. And then both India and Pakistan engaged in a limited 4-day conflict with each other. My question is that on one hand, we saw Islamabad actually rely on Chinese weapon platforms like the PL-15 and the J-10C in order to defend itself against India. And now very recently, we are seeing Islamabad once again double down on procurements from Beijing, speaking of platforms such as 5th generation platforms like J-35, HQ-19, KJ-500. What do you have to say, and please help me understand and my audience, to what extent is Beijing willing to go forward in terms of meeting the security needs of Islamabad?
First of all, there was a terrorist attack. And personally, I condemn terrorism of all kinds, shapes, and forms. However, I think India should have exhausted all the investigations before they pointing accusing finger at Pakistan, as if Pakistan orchestrated this terrorist attack. Therefore, for India to launch military attacks inside Pakistan in the name of retaliation against this terrorist attack sponsored and supported by Pakistan is not the right thing for India to do. Now, in the aerial battle, everyone knows that India lost and Pakistan won, and Pakistan shot down up to about 5 or 6 planes on the Indian side. And India seemed to live in parallel universe. They claim that they won the battle and Pakistan was defeated and China was defeated. India destroyed lots of planes and military equipment, sometimes produced by Pakistan itself, sometimes jointly produced by China and Pakistan, or sometimes provided by China. Now, this is complete parallel universe. I think it's fortunate that even President Trump said India lost a lot of planes. And now that the Pakistani side demanded, you do this inventory checking as to how many planes each side is left with, then you can really come up to the real number of military losses on the Indian side. So I hope personally, India will live in reality and they will realize the futility of attacking Pakistan by planes or otherwise. And they need to deal with Pakistan as an equal and respecting the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of Pakistan. Now, as far as China is concerned, China is fully committed to providing maximum support to Pakistan in defending its legitimate interests, including defending its sovereignty and territorial integrity. I don't think any country in the world should second guess China's commitment to this ironclad brotherhood and sisterhood between China and Pakistan. And we are true brothers and sisters with each other, and we respect each other. We want to protect each other, and we want to share as much technology and breakthroughs as possible. I think the fact that China and Pakistan jointly produce planes together, fighter planes, as well as China supplying Pakistan with very sophisticated fighter planes, as well as other military cooperation, is the foundation for Pakistan to win this aerial battle against India early May. And I truly believe China-Pakistani cooperation will continue in leaps and bounds in the years and decades to come. They are not against India. They are purely economic and military cooperation between two neighboring countries which treat each other as brothers and sisters. And I think Pakistan should really rest assured that they have an ironclad friend and brother and sister in China. And China wants to do whatever it can to make sure that Pakistan will be able to defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity. Let me give you another example. I think after the aerial battle, the Indian leaders threatened to divert water from the Indus River, and the Prime Minister even threatened that no single drop of water should be given to Pakistan. I declared that by weaponizing water in the Indus River in times of peace will be considered as a crime against humanity. How can you deny hundreds of millions of people in the downstream in Pakistan the benefit of water in the Indus River? And in times of war, this will be considered as a war crime. And I emphasize to the Indian audience that, as a matter of fact, while Pakistan is the downstream country, as far as the Indus River is concerned, India is not the real upstream country for the Indus River. They are actually the middle ranged country, middle stream country, as far as the Indus River is concerned. China is the real upper stream country. And I told the Indians that don't do unto others what you don't want others do unto you. Meaning, don't weaponize water against the Pakistanis in the downstream, because you need to really worry that if you do the wrong thing against the Pakistanis, maybe the Indus River will be weaponized against you. I don't mean China will ever do that, but at least the Indians should have second thoughts if they want to weaponize the Indus River. Now, this applies to many other things between China and Pakistan and between China and India. We should really respect each other. I even told the Indians, don't try to separate Balochistan from Pakistan. Don't try to stir up separatism inside Pakistan, because if the Indians keep doing that in violation of Pakistan's sovereignty and territorial integrity, they really need to worry about India being split into 7 countries. Because if other countries really do the same thing as Indians are doing for Balochistan, then India will really have the real prospect of separatism inside India, eventually splitting the country into 7 countries. Therefore, I urge on the Indians to respect Pakistan as a sovereign country, respect its territorial integrity, and resort to peace and negotiation and diplomacy to solve whatever problems there are between India and Pakistan, and also between China and India. We want to urge on the Indians to really come to a final solution of the border disputes. but will never recognize the Magma line as the eastern border between China and India.
So it's very interesting that you made mention of Balochistan and about stirring up trouble over there. We've recently seen both India and Pakistan accuse each other of terrorism, and then on one hand, in the recent years, we've also seen Western countries also raise concerns about India's involvement in targeting dissidents. Islamabad has also echoed similar concerns. And especially, in terms of their involvement when it comes to supporting networks that are involved in carrying out such terrorist activities, especially in Balochistan, and particularly those who've been involved in targeting, Chinese nationals. If there is to be shared some kind of an evidence with Beijing, do you think Beijing is likely to take up this issue with New Delhi in terms of, targeting of its nationals inside Pakistan? And where do you see that going forward diplomatically? Do you think Beijing would be able to weigh in on New Delhi in terms of, giving up this pattern of supporting such actors?
So I would say for South Asia as a whole and for Central Asia as a whole, we need to work together collectively between and among countries, especially now that both Pakistan and India are members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So we actually have platforms to coordinate our efforts against the terrorist attacks in one country or the other, or across national boundaries, etc. And we should all call on every country within SOC organization or within the Asia region, South Asia region or Central Asia region, to avoid weaponizing terrorism, meaning using terrorism as an instrument to achieve your own domestic or geopolitical goals at the expense of a neighboring country. Now, whether India has been really doing up to the standard, that's questionable, but I would call on the Indian government to respect the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of Pakistan and respect the fact that Balochistan is part of the sovereign territory of Pakistan and refrain from doing anything to urge the independence, the so-called independence of Balochistan from Pakistan. Because if they do that, then they will really open up the bottle of genies and they may eventually be the victim of their own wrongdoing. Now, terrorism of all colors and shapes and forms should be condemned and dealt with effectively by the collective efforts of all the countries in South Asia, in Central Asia, for all the countries, neighboring countries of China, and China has 14 land and neighboring countries altogether. We need to work together to make sure that we do not suffer the consequences of terrorism, especially terrorism in other countries, instigated by some certain other countries. So I think we need to work together to fight against the terrorism and deal with the threat of terrorism. And no country in South Asia or Central Asia should be allowed to use terrorism as an instrument against sovereignty and territorial integrity of the other neighboring countries.
All right, Mr. Gao, let me draw your attention to another question. And this has more to do with a concern that is found in New Delhi. And this is about both China and Pakistan actually posing a reinforced front threat. Do you think this concern is really correct? Simply because, Pakistan happens to be procuring a good part of its defense imports from China, or to put it the other way, do you think it's correct to also say that if India is to fight Pakistan, it is actually fighting with China? Is that assessment correct in your opinion, or this is just completely misplaced and perhaps is likely to lead the region of Southern or South Asia into more instability and chaos?
First of all, from the Chinese perspective, China-Pakistani cooperation and support of each other is not against any other third country. Whether India is a factor or not, China and Pakistan will continue our cooperation. Secondly, China's weapon system actually is one of the most sophisticated and most developed in the world of today. Not many people know about that because China has not been publicly talking about how advanced its weapon systems are, both in terms of the conventional weapons as well as the non-conventional weapons. China is also an exporter of weapons, but not as big as US exporter or Russian exporter of weapons. However, it is a reality that the Chinese conventional weapons are very sophisticated. And in China, we have a highly digitized way of advancing the weapons functions and efficiency. And we always talk about a merged network involving space, sky, meaning Air Force, ground, meaning land force, navies on the surface of the sea, as well as the submarines. So these 5 dimensions need to merge into a seamless web, enabling the efficiency of the military whenever it is deployed against an enemy or an adversary. And I think the success demonstrated by the Pakistani force, especially the Air Force, early May, is a result of the seamless integration of the satellites, the space, the sky, the ground force, the Navy force, as well as the submarine. And this should be the megatrend going forward. The military confrontation or the wars in the future should not be fought in isolation of this complete integrated system. Weapons should no longer just operate separately in its own capacity. The weapons, the soldiers, the devices, the hardware, the software, the information need to be all merged into a seamless web to create a lot of efficiency and potency. And in this regard, I'm afraid India is lagging behind because unlike China, which has achieved 100% self-reliance in terms of its weapons system, China produces all weapons completely by itself. It does not rely on importing any weapons from any other country. India really imports weapons from all the countries, and they find it almost impossible to create a seamless web, enabling all the different weapon systems, planes, for example, the satellites, and their AWACS system to integrate into a seamless web. This is the disadvantage of the Indian military defense strategy. And if they want to continue to rely on imports from different countries, they probably will suffer the consequence likewise for many decades to come. On the other hand, India should fully recognize the fact that China is the most important manufacturing country in the world of today. China's manufacturing output is larger than the combined amount of the United States, Japan, Germany, South Korea, and quite a few other leading manufacturing countries. And India, as of today, is not a major player in terms of manufacturing output. So, I hope we should be realistic and very pragmatic. We should really commit to promoting peace between India and Pakistan on the one hand, and promoting peace between China and Pakistan, China and India on the other hand. So no one should really wear war on their lips and keep talking about war and war and war against your neighbors. We should really focus on talking about peace, talking about joint development and cooperation, and how countries like China, India, Pakistan, and quite a few others can talk about cooperation for artificial intelligence, for example, because the real competition eventually may not be between country A versus country B. The real competition may be between AI on the one hand versus Homo sapien on the other hand. So mankind as a whole needs to scramble up into action to accelerate our science and development and technological breakthroughs to make sure that mankind as a whole, are not being pushed to a second species in the future.
Let's come back to the after effects of the tariff wars. And we've seen over the years, Prime Minister Modi has actually cozied up to President Trump, trying to basically, woo him and in order to build stronger ties between the two countries. What do you exactly have to say now that India has been imposed with about 50% tariffs by a Trump administration? And as a consequence, we see New Delhi reaching out to both Moscow and Beijing. And Prime Minister Modi has actually decided to actually visit Beijing and meet President Xi at the SCO summit. And China has actually welcomed this move. How do you exactly see this move? Do you think that this overture by New Delhi is grounded with serious or unserious intentions, or do you think it's just simply meant to express its frustration with the Trump administration?
At present, President Trump and the US government are holding a gun at the head of Prime Minister Modi and India as a country. They expect that by manhandling India, India will succumb to the maximum pressure from the United States. On the other hand, India has always taken great pride in being an independent country with its own sovereignty and with its own decision-making power vested solely in India. And it is up to the Indian government and the people to decide where they want to buy oil and gas from, how much they want to buy that from one particular exporter, and how they want to deal with their trading relations with other countries. Therefore, I think India is right now caught up in a very delicate situation, whether it decides to succumb to the pressure from the United States, as many countries more or less have managed to do that because they do not want to bear the brunt of the US pressure and the US manhandling of one country versus the other, or whether India wants to stand up to this opportunity to defend the free trade. And I think for a aspiring country like India, they really need to figure out what is the best thing they want to do in front of this maximum pressure from Washington. What President Trump and his government is doing demonstrates that they do not show respect for India's sovereignty and India's legitimate interest. They want to manhandle India, and they want to treat India as a secondary country or a tertiary country, rather than a country really on a par with the United States, for example. This is very dangerous because you are talking about the United States manhandling India, which has a population larger than that of China, and a country with, relatively speaking, very rapid economic development, and a country which believes that it will be the third largest economy in a matter of years, and they may be actually the second largest economy before 2050. So I think we need to really size up the situation, and I would not be surprised if India eventually decides to do what China is doing, that is to defend its legitimate interest at any cost, and don't be pushed around by Washington, and don't turn yourself into a secondary, if not a tertiary country with no international prestige. For example, China and India and the United States in particular need to come up with a way to show respect for each other, deal with each other as equals, rather than allowing one country to bully the other country.
And Mr. Gao, my last question, and this is about China and Pakistan. We've seen, Pakistan and China start off this major project in form of China-Pakistan Economic Corridor almost a decade back. Now, with Pakistan also trying to woo investments and trade with the United States, and recently we've seen two Pakistani firms actually engage in a business partnership in the area of building up electric vehicles in Pakistan. Speaking of CPEC itself, where do you think the progress is likely to go forward? Do you think China is likely to go ahead and move some part of its production capacity inside Pakistan in the months and the years to come?
First of all, CPEC is the largest project within the whole BRI framework, and the huge amount of investment into the CPEC project is unprecedented, almost in human history. So I hope China and Pakistan will really get to the bottom of the situation and make sure that the whole CPEC corridor is safe, is free from terrorist attacks. Each time when a Chinese national is killed inside the Pakistan, it causes a lot of grief among the Chinese people. And the relatives of the killed Chinese national will demand that the Chinese government take very firm actions to deal with the terrorist attacks happening inside Pakistan, especially in Balochistan, where the CPEC corridor goes through. So I hope Pakistan, the military, the government, and the people will really take very firm action to fight against these terrorist attacks, because otherwise you destroy the overall environment where such major connectivity projects will take place. Without safety and security and reliability and predictability, these mega projects can hardly move forward. Now, if there are other countries which want to invest in Pakistan, like the United States, be my guest. The more countries interested in investing in Pakistan, the better. And I hope more countries will cooperate with China and Pakistan to make sure that Pakistan becomes very safe as far as attracting foreign direct investment is concerned, as well as building up its manufacturing capacities, etc. I think there are lots of companies in China which are interested in investing in Pakistan, but the precondition, allow me to emphasize for your benefit of your audience, is to make sure that the lives of the Chinese nationals will not be sacrificed and will not be taken away by these brutal terrorist attacks. And I really have confidence that the Pakistani military, the Pakistani government, and the overall people in Pakistan will take this very seriously to make sure that the ironclad friendship between China and Pakistan can withstand all the tests and all the challenges. And we will really make sure that no lives of the Chinese national will be lost in Pakistan again at the hands of these heinous terrorists.
Mr. Gao, on this note, I would like to thank you for your time and for joining us for this podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a great pleasure.
If you've liked our conversation today, please don't forget to like, share, or drop a comment in the comments below. Thank you very much.